When you look at the geography of a certain country, you could tell if this country is powerful, poor, or rich. When you look at the South Korean geography, you think that it's a poor country. And when you enter the country, you say, wow, it should be pretty poor in here. It's very small. It doesn't have good soil. It gets extremely cold. On this land, you can't even smell oil and gas, let alone find it. You can't even find coal in this country. And it's good to know that South Korea is in last place in terms of fossil fuel reserves. Fossil fuels like oil. So right here, we have a poor country. But as you know, South Korea is not poor whatsoever, and it's one of the richest countries in the world. Its economy is 10th place in the world, and that's an extremely respectable placement for a country located over here. So how did South Korea actually become a rich country? Most of the success this country has found returns to one country, and that's Samsung, a company everybody heard of, and you might probably have a device made by them. Samsung is a Korean word that means 3 stars. Before Japan lost in World War II, the Korean peninsula was in Japanese hands, and Japan had a border with Russia through Korea. There is a city in South Korea called Daegu, a poor village back then, and the only money they made was from fish and noodles. Around that time, in the year 1938, a businessman by the name Lee Byung-chul started a company called Samsung. So what did this company actually do? Did they sell electronics all around the world? No, it had nothing to do with electronics. It was a sugar cane company. Time passes and we get to the year 1950. The Soviet Union has recently got their hands on an atomic bomb and they're feeling feisty. The first war they start is in Korea and they take over all the peninsula except this little corner right here. And that's when the US joins the war. They start from the bottom and push the communists back. The Americans and the communists fought for about 3 years and they kept pushing each other back and forth. And then eventually, July of 1953, they cut this peninsula in half. The north is controlled by the communists in the Soviet Union, and the south is controlled by USA. So you could say these superpowers, mainly the Soviet because they started the war, cut this peninsula in half. And it's been over 70 years since the same people from the same country has been cut in half. During this whole time, Lee Byung-chul's company was destroyed. But when the war was over in 1954, Lee started the company back up and he continued the sugarcane company. He also added another thing they did in the business, and they started producing wool and sending them to textile companies. By doing this, Lee turned Samsung into the 4th richest company in Korea. But this company is growing that's extremely poor throughout it. It was at that time where the South Korean banks started investing money into different industries, and they made it extremely easy for businesses to get loans from banks. You could say by doing this, they were investing in South Korean companies. This company was so poor that if you calculate it, just 19% of its economy was owned by Lee Byung-chul, and with that, you can understand how poor the Korean people were. Time passes and we get to 1962. This is the year where Park Chung-hee becomes the South Korean president. What Park said was very important, and he suggested we only have to work on the economy of this country. And what I mean by that is that we should produce our own goods. When Park was president, every day the economy would see growth. But he wouldn't let go of the industry. He would tell them, you have to produce goods that the Western nations will buy from us. So it has to be higher quality. Park Chung-hee was a very capitalist president because he was looking for rules to charge less tax to industries, and this allows them to grow exponentially. This type of plan makes the rich pay less taxes, get way richer, but all the pressure of taxes are on the middle class and lower class people. This is similar to the US. The richer you are, the less tax you pay. This allowed South Korean companies to get richer, especially Samsung. We get to the 1970s, also known as the electronics decade. Everything electronic is growing. Lee Byung-chul knew what he could do to make Samsung bigger, so he went towards electronics. And he moved on from wool and textile and sugar. Park Chung-hee policies made the companies in South Korea grow exponentially. On the side of Samsung, Hyundai was the next big company in South Korea, and it was also growing at a rapid rate. A country that only a few years ago, its people would go to sleep starving. Its policies made people now have jobs and they at least have some money to buy some food. Day after day passes, Samsung continues to grow. The middle class has access to more money, and South Korea's GDP is growing every day. In the year 1987, Lee Byung-chul dies, and his son Lee Kun-hee takes over the company. Year after year passes, and Samsung's products go global, and this company turns into the South Korean culture. And that means the population of Korea really admires Samsung, and they're proud of this company. Samsung grew so quickly year after year that in 2017, when they add everything up, they realized that 20% of South Korean economy comes from Samsung. And for a country that's this rich, to have a company that controls this much of the GDP is insane. If you compare it to a country like Japan, its biggest company is Toyota, but it only controls 5% of the GDP of Japan. The biggest company in the US in terms of GDP is Walmart, and it only controls 2.5% of the American GDP. So now we realize that Samsung is the leader of South Korean economy. A lot of people believe that the South Korean government is run under Samsung because 1/5 of the economy is brung in by this company, and this puts a huge impact on the South Korean government. The people like Samsung so much that they see Samsung employees like they're in a higher class. If you say you work for Samsung, there's a high chance they'll respect you more. This culture really helps Samsung grow around the world as well. If you talk to South Korean students, one of their dreams is to work for a company like Samsung. Right now, about 266,000 employees work for Samsung in South Korea. South Korean youth really like to get a job in Samsung when they grow up, but obviously they can't hire everybody. So the second best choice for them is Hyundai, or third, LG. These are other huge companies ran in South Korea. So why does Samsung need this many workers? Do you guys think that Samsung only sells electronics? No, that's completely wrong. In South Korea, this company has all types of branches. If you need to get life insurance, Samsung offers it. If you want boats or ships, Samsung builds them. You guys already know the electronics and appliances that's supplied by Samsung. In South Korea, there are a lot of fairs that are ran by Samsung. Samsung has 59 different branches of companies, and it starts from electronics, from robotic schools, laboratories, and many others. Each branch is their own company. It's good to know. As you know, Samsung stocks is sold all over the world and many people have them. But this company is mainly controlled by one family, and that's Lee Byung-chul's son, Lee Kun-hee. All the power is in this guy's family's hands. Lee died in 2020, And it's good to know in South Korea, if somebody dies, 50% of the goods that's supposed to be passed down to your family or friends, they all get taxed. And this is the highest tax after somebody dies. But before Lee Kun-hee died, he knew what was gonna happen. So long story short, he creates a company, puts all the goods and businesses under one roof. A company that's ran by the entire family basically. In this case, they don't have to pay that 50% tax when he dies. Just like we said, Lee Kun-hee died in 2020, but not a single dime was spent on taxes because of the tactic they used. You could say they used a loophole to prevent the taxes. Nowadays, Samsung has so much power in South Korea that a lot of people are complaining about it. They complain that South Korea is controlled by Samsung and it's ran like a dictatorship. And the government workers are basically supposed to listen to whatever Samsung says. You could say the politicians in South Korea don't have the guts to say anything to Samsung because they're afraid that Samsung will leave Korea because they know South Korea can't live without Samsung. But Samsung can live without South Korea. And just like Apple, they can go to China and start their company. And China loves this because Apple is the richest company on earth and all its goods is built in China. So Samsung has the upper hand because they built all their goods in Korea. So we can name this company Samsung Republic or Republic of Samsung Korea. When you become a capitalist, you really grow the economy. But when one company controls the country like this, it's not really a good look. You could call this company a monopoly. Let me know what you guys think about this.